Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now the GTX 750 Ti is one of my favourite graphics cards of all time. Back in 2014 this $149 entry level GPU helped modernise many ageing gaming systems, and it was ideal for transforming regular home or office PCs into something with a little more kick. We've looked back at this card on many occasions, but this time things are different. It is with regret that I have to say I can no longer fully recommend this legendary piece of hardware. I say I can't fully recommend it because it is still worth considering if you have a limited budget and the desire to play a game that you know is specifically supported, but the lack of full DirectX 12 support means that more and more games simply won't start. It's too hit and miss. I knew back in late 2020 when Assassin's Creed Valhalla refused to start that this thing's days would soon be numbered, but it was when I began testing the card for this video that I realised just how problematic a DX11 only feature level graphics card could be in 2022. In my current library there were 3 titles that didn't start. These were Battlefield 2042, which froze on startup and required a system shutdown, Halo Infinite, which when selecting play from Steam didn't even open, and the newly released Elden Ring, which got as far as a white loading screen, sometimes a little bit further before closing. There are other titles I know of that won't work, like the aforementioned Assassin's Creed, as well as others I'm sure. It's a very hit and miss experience with the 750 Ti these days, but it is still supported with the latest Nvidia drivers at the time of this video, and with the bad news out of the way, I'm happy to report that most of my games will still run, and thanks to the implementation of things like FSR and NIS, they will run surprisingly well with the card. Sure, the 2 gigs of VRAM found on most models also proves restrictive, but this much loved component is going out kicking and screaming. It won't surrender without a fight. So let's celebrate one of the greatest graphics cards from Nvidia's lineup. Cyberpunk version 1.5 benefits from FSR, so hitting at least 30 FPS on average isn't a problem so as long as we stick to low settings. We could potentially push medium, but that might mean using an even more aggressive level of FSR, making things harder to see. Using performance mode doesn't distort the image too much. There will still be the odd dip below 30, and the same applies to if we were using native 720p for example. There is no escaping the performance drops, but it is playable to a degree, especially if 30 FPS is fine for you. Far Cry 6 also supports FSR, but I'm not too keen on how it looks. Things seem to have a sort of shimmering edge to them, which I think might be caused by the type of anti-aliasing used, but I'm no expert as far as things like that are concerned. What I do know is that I prefer to play this game at native 1280 by 720 with the 750 Ti, and to my surprise the game will run with a fairly respectable frame rate. Bear in mind I do have the card overclocked slightly, which helps I'm sure. The percentile figures are also okay despite a low memory warning, even with the low settings. I found that in Far Cry 6 the low VRAM warning isn't too much of a cause for concern. Things stayed pretty consistent over my half-hour gameplay period. Don't get me wrong, 2 gig cards are probably best avoided these days, but here that amount isn't as detrimental as I thought it would be. If you're looking for a cheap graphics card to play Fortnite, then look no further. Low settings with a couple of adjustments to anti-aliasing and view distance provides a decent overall average, with some dips here and there as expected. I don't really know what else to say about Fortnite because it runs absolutely fine, and the absolute lowest or performance settings certainly aren't necessary. One game I thought would certainly crash or not start at all would be Forza Horizon 5. I did get a low memory warning once again, which flashed up during a pretty important moment of a race, which threw me off a little bit, but after disabling that message it didn't bother me again, and I didn't notice any significant stutters that can commonly be associated with VRAM issues, though I did notice the frame rate sort of get lower and lower as I made my way through a busy town. I never realised, but this game also has a dynamic scaling feature, and here I set it to quality mode to counteract the lower percentile figures I commonly saw when racing through busier areas. Using this setting helped keep things above 30 FPS. This was with 2x MSAA enabled as well. The preset was of course set to low, though I avoided very low because it looks a lot worse. Sometimes it looks like a different game in fact. GTA San Andreas The Definitive Edition is the first game tested so far today in which I enabled NIS or Nvidia image scaling. This allows us to render the game at a lower resolution and have it upscaled to fit our native output. With sharpening. It works pretty well in fact, and it certainly helps maintain a more solid frame rate here. NIS has been a very welcome feature, and the 750 Ti is perhaps one of the oldest cards that supports it. I recommend checking it out if you have this card or anything from the 900 series or later, because it can be instrumental in achieving higher frame rates where perhaps FSR or dynamic scaling isn't available. GTA 5 still runs well at native 1080p like it always has with the 750 Ti. Highest settings net us at least 60 FPS, and this game still holds up pretty well graphically in 2022. Again, just like I said about Fortnite, if you want a cheap graphics card that's going to play this game and you're not bothered about the latest DX12 titles, then one of these might still be right for you, but I'd seriously consider a GTX 950 instead, or a 1050 Ti as the minimum to aim for because of the 4 gigs of memory, which I would say is the new minimum if you haven't got too much to spend. There are 1 or 2 4GB standard 750s about as well, and I think some 750 Ti's do come with 4 gigs, but again, there's still that DX11 limitation. Alternatively, I know a GM206 variant of the standard 750 exists, which is based on the Maxwell 2.0 architecture. This supports DX12, but it has 2 gigs of RAM, and it's probably very hard to find. Another title that benefits from Nvidia image scaling is Red Dead Redemption 2, though we are still limited to the low settings. This texture quality can potentially be upped within the INI file, like every other setting, but ultimately this will cause issues and performance problems, especially in and around busier areas like Valentine and Saint Denis. Finally, it's Mafia Definitive Edition. This is one of my favourite games of all time, and with NIS at 1477 by 831 resolution, we are seeing at least 30 FPS. Now, I really don't mind 30 FPS in third-person games, to be honest, and it's even better when we exceed it by quite the margin. It feels fine to me, but it's all about personal preference. Now overall, there's no denying that the Nvidia GTX 750 Ti can still provide a decent gaming experience in certain games. AMD alternatives like the R7 260X or 360 sound better at a similar used price, but it depends on what they cost where you live and if you can find them. Not to mention that despite DX12 support, they have reached legacy status driver-wise. I'd recommend looking out for a cheap RX 460 or 560 as a minimum, the 4 gig versions of course, but not if they cost well over 100 of any currency. Overall, the 750 Ti will live on in the hearts of many, and there will certainly be future releases that will run just fine on this card, I'm sure. For how long, I can't say, but it's still hanging on in there. To be honest, it's probably best avoided these days, but there we go, the 750 Ti, it's only been 8 years, but I think it's finally time to say goodbye to this once legendary GPU. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, leave a dislike if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, let me know if you still use one of these in your system and how well it's holding up for you in the games you play. Thank you very much for watching then, and I'll see you all in the next one.